You're sitting at dinner with your parents, and somehow the conversation turns to money. Your dad starts talking about how he bought his first house at 27, paid it off by 45, and retired comfortably at 62. And you're sitting there thinking, okay, I'm 32, I have $47,000 in student loans, my rent is more than his mortgage ever was, and retirement feels like this abstract concept that exists somewhere between winning the lottery and getting abducted by aliens. So you do what every frustrated millennial does. You blame the economy, blame inflation, blame boomers, blame avocado toast, blame whatever feels convenient. And look, some of that frustration is completely valid. The economic landscape has genuinely shifted in ways that make building wealth harder than it used to be. But here's what's going to make you uncomfortable: the strategy that made America the wealthiest nation in human history, the strategy that built generational fortunes and created the middle class your grandparents thrived in. That strategy is still available to you right now, and it has almost nothing to do with working harder. My name is Max, and I spend way too much time thinking about why some people build wealth almost effortlessly while others grind themselves into dust and still end up broke. If you're someone who feels like you're doing everything right, but your bank account keeps disagreeing, or if you've ever wondered why your parents seem to accumulate more on less income, hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up, because today we're talking about the single most powerful wealth building mechanism in American history. And spoiler alert, it's not hustle culture, it's not grinding 80 hours a week, and it's definitely not some crypto scheme your cousin keeps texting you about. Here's the thing most people completely miss about American wealth. When you look at the families who built serious, lasting, multi generational wealth in this country, they didn't do it by working more hours than everyone else. They did it by understanding something so simple it almost feels insulting. They figured out how to make their money work while they slept. Now, before you roll your eyes and think I'm about to pitch you some passive income guru nonsense, hear me out. Because what I'm talking about is backed by over 200 years of economic data, and it explains why America became the dominant economic force on the planet. The strategy is called ownership. Not just owning stuff, but owning productive assets that generate returns without requiring your direct labor. Let me show you why this matters with some numbers that might make your brain hurt. A study tracking American households over several decades found that the median family that owns stocks has a net worth roughly 13 times higher than families that don't. 13 times. Same country, same economy, same opportunities, 13 times the wealth just from one behavioral difference. But here's what's really interesting about this: the families building wealth through ownership aren't necessarily making more money from their jobs, they're just doing something different with whatever money they do make. They're converting earned income into owned assets. This is the fundamental shift that most people never make, and it's costing them everything. Think about how most people interact with money. Paycheck comes in, bills go out. Maybe there's a little left over, maybe there isn't. If there is, it sits in a checking account earning basically nothing, slowly getting eaten alive by inflation. Rinse and repeat for 40 years, then wonder why retirement feels impossible. Now think about how wealth builders interact with money. Paycheck comes in, a portion immediately gets converted into ownership stakes in productive businesses, through the stock market, into real estate, into assets that generate returns. Bills still get paid, life still gets lived, but a portion of every dollar earned becomes a permanent worker that never takes a day off. This is not a minor distinction. This is the entire game. Here's what most people don't realize about the American economic system: it's fundamentally designed to reward owners more than workers. I'm not saying that's fair or unfair. I'm just telling you how the machine actually operates. The tax code favors investment income over earned income. The Federal Reserve's policies tend to inflate asset prices. The entire structure of capitalism directs wealth toward people who own productive assets. You can spend your whole life complaining about this system, or you can learn to use it. The wealthy figured this out generations ago. They're not smarter than you. They're not more deserving than you. They just understood the rules of the game earlier. Let me give you a concrete example of how this plays out over time because the math is genuinely insane. Let's say you make $60,000 a year. After taxes and basic expenses, you have $500 per month that you could either spend or invest. If you spend that $500 every month on stuff, experiences, whatever, after 30 years, you've spent $180,000 and you have nothing to show for it except memories and maybe some furniture that's fallen apart. But if you invest that $500 per month into a simple index fund, earning the historical average of about 10% annually, after 30 years, you have over $1.1 million. Same person, same income, same expenses, completely different financial outcome. One person retired comfortably, the other person is wondering if they can afford to stop working before they die. This is not complicated math. This is not some secret the rich are hiding from you. This is basic compound interest combined with the fundamental principle of ownership. And yet, somehow most people never do it. Here's where it gets interesting from a psychological standpoint. The reason most people don't make this shift has nothing to do with intelligence or even discipline. It has everything to do with how we're programmed to think about money. From childhood, most of us are taught a simple equation: work equals money. You put in hours, you get paid. The harder you work, the more you make. This seems logical and it's true to a point, but it's also a trap that keeps most people permanently broke. Because here's the problem with the work equals money equation: your time is finite. There are only so many hours in a day, only so many days in a year, only so many years in a working life. If your income is purely tied to your labor, you've put a hard ceiling on your wealth potential. You can only work so many hours before your body and mind give out. The wealthy understand a different equation: ownership equals wealth. They might work hard too, but their primary focus isn't trading more hours for more dollars. Their focus is acquiring ownership stakes in things that generate returns independent of their labor. This is why a hedge fund manager can make more in a single year than a teacher makes in a lifetime. It's not because managing money is inherently more valuable to society than educating children. It's because the hedge fund manager owns a piece of the returns they generate. The teacher only owns their time. Again, I'm not saying this is how things should be. I'm saying this is how things are. And if you want to build wealth, you need to operate within reality, not within how you wish reality worked. Now you might be thinking, okay, Max, this sounds great in theory, but I can barely pay my rent. How am I supposed to become an owner when I'm living paycheck to paycheck? This is the objection I hear most often, and it's completely valid. But it's also based on a misunderstanding of how ownership wealth actually gets built. You don't need to be rich to start owning assets. You need to be consistent. The difference between someone who retires wealthy and someone who retires broke usually isn't that one made more money. It's that one consistently converted a portion of whatever they made into ownership stakes, and the other consistently spent everything they made. Let me show you how accessible this actually is. You can open a brokerage account today with literally $0. You can buy fractional shares of companies for as little as $1. You can invest in index funds that give you ownership stakes in hundreds of the most profitable businesses on the planet for the cost of a mediocre dinner. The barrier to entry for ownership has never been lower in human history. Your great grandparents couldn't do this. They needed thousands of dollars in a personal relationship with a stockbroker just to buy their first share. You can do it on your phone while waiting in line at the grocery store. The excuse that you can't afford to invest is almost always a prioritization problem disguised as an affordability problem. I know people making $40,000 a year who consistently invest $200 per month. I also know people making $150,000 a year who invest nothing because they're too busy financing luxury cars and eating at restaurants 6 nights a week. The question isn't whether you can afford to invest. The question is what you're willing to give up to start building real wealth. Here's something that really drives this point home. When you look at how the average American millionaire actually built their wealth, it's almost boring. Studies of everyday millionaires found that the vast majority got there through consistent investing over decades, not through inheritances, not through starting businesses, not through winning the lottery. Just regular people putting regular money into regular investments for an extraordinarily long time. The median age when these millionaires hit their first million was 49 years old. They weren't overnight success stories. They were people who understood the ownership principle and applied it consistently for 20 or 30 years. This is where the psychology gets really interesting. Most people are wired to value immediate rewards over distant ones. It's called hyperbolic discounting, and it's hardwired into our brains from thousands of years of evolution when immediate survival was more important than long term planning. This programming made perfect sense when humans were worried about getting eaten by predators. It makes much less sense when you're trying to build wealth in a modern economy. Your brain literally wants you to spend money now rather than invest it for later. It takes conscious effort to override this default setting. The wealthy have either naturally or deliberately trained themselves to think differently. They get more satisfaction from watching their investments grow than from buying stuff. They view every purchase through the lens of opportunity cost. That $500 spent on something disposable isn't just $500 to them. It's the $10,000 or $50,000 that money would have become over decades of compound growth. This mental shift is the real secret to building wealth. It's not about deprivation or living like a monk. It's about genuinely valuing your future more than your present impulses. Now, let me tell you about the specific ownership strategy that built American wealth more than any other: broad market index investing. This is so simple that people assume it can't work. You buy a fund that owns a little piece of every major company in America. You keep buying more of it every month, regardless of what the market is doing. You don't try to pick winners, you don't try to time the market, you just own everything and wait. Over the past century, this approach has returned roughly 10% annually on average. That includes every crash, every recession, every depression, every war, every pandemic, every crisis you can imagine. Through all of it, broad ownership of American businesses has been the single most reliable wealth building mechanism available to ordinary people. Here's why this works so well. When you own the entire market, you're betting on human innovation and economic growth as a whole. You're betting that over the long term, humans will continue to create value, solve problems, and grow the economic pie. Given that this has happened consistently for the past few hundred years, it seems like a reasonable bet. But more importantly, broad index investing eliminates most of the ways people destroy their own wealth. You can't panic sell individual stocks because you don't own individual stocks. You can't get wiped out by one company going bankrupt because you own hundreds of companies. You can't get emotional about your portfolio because there's nothing to get emotional about. You just own the market and let time do its work. This strategy is so effective that Warren Buffett, arguably the greatest investor in history, has publicly stated that it's what he recommends for most people. He's even instructed the trustee of his estate to put 90% of his wife's inheritance into a simple S&P 500 index fund. If the greatest investor ever thinks broad market ownership is the right approach for most people, what makes you think you're going to beat the market by picking individual stocks or timing your trades? Here's where things get really powerful. When you combine the ownership principle with the concept of tax-advantaged accounts, you're essentially using the government's own rules to accelerate your wealth building. 401k accounts, IRAs, Roth IRAs, these aren't just savings accounts. They're wealth building accelerators accelerators that the government created specifically to encourage ownership. The tax advantages compound over time in ways that dramatically increase your final wealth. Let me show you the difference with real numbers. If you invest $500 per month in a regular taxable account for 30 years at 10% annual returns, you'll end up with roughly 1.1 million, but you'll owe significant taxes on those gains when you sell. If you invest that same $500 per month in a Roth IRA where your money grows tax-free, you end up with the same $1.1 million, but you owe zero taxes on any of it. The entire amount is yours. The difference in actual spendable wealth is enormous. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars that either go to your retirement or go to the government. And the crazy thing is, both approaches require the exact same amount of money and effort from you. The only difference is which account you put the money in. Most Americans are not maximizing their tax-advantaged accounts. They're leaving literally hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table over their lifetimes because they don't understand how these accounts work, or they don't think they can afford to contribute. If your employer offers a 401k match and you're not contributing enough to get the full match, you are voluntarily declining free money. There is no investment in the world that offers guaranteed 50% or 100% immediate returns. That's what an employer match is. It's the closest thing to free money that exists in personal finance, and millions of people ignore it. Now here's the part that ties this all together. The reason America became the wealthiest nation in history isn't because Americans work harder than everyone else. Germans work plenty hard. Japanese workers are famous for their dedication. The reason is that America created the most accessible and robust system for ordinary people to become owners of productive assets. The stock market, retirement accounts, tax advantages for investors, all of these made it possible for regular people to participate in the ownership economy. For most of human history, ownership was reserved for the aristocracy, the landed gentry, the inherited wealthy. America democratized ownership in a way that had never been done before. The tragedy is that most Americans don't take advantage of this system. They work their entire lives, trade their time for money, spend what they earn, and end up with nothing to show for decades of labor. Meanwhile, the people who understood the ownership principle, even those making modest incomes, built wealth that transformed their families' futures. So here's what you actually do with this information. First, you shift your mental model. Stop thinking about money as something you earn and spend. Start thinking about it as something you convert into ownership. Every dollar that passes through your hands is a choice: consumption or ownership, present or future, staying broke or building wealth. Second, you start immediately, regardless of how little you can invest. The amount matters less than the habit. Someone who invests $100 per month starting at 20 will have more at retirement than someone who invests $500 per month starting at 40. Time is your most valuable asset, and every month you delay costs you more than you realize. Third, you keep it simple. Buy a broad market index fund. Contribute every month regardless of what the market is doing. Don't check it constantly. Don't try to time it. Don't get scared when it drops. Just own the market and let decades of compound growth do what they've always done. Fourth, you maximize tax advantages. If your employer offers a match, get the full match. If you qualify for a Roth IRA, max it out. These accounts aren't just nice to have. They're the difference between retiring comfortably and retiring barely. Fifth, you protect your ownership mindset. There will be people who make you feel stupid for investing instead of spending. There will be times when the market drops and your portfolio loses value. There will be moments when you want to cash out and buy something shiny. These are tests. The people who pass them become wealthy. The people who fail them stay broke. The ownership strategy that made America number one isn't complicated. It isn't secret. It isn't reserved for the wealthy or the connected. It's available to anyone willing to understand how the system actually works and to act accordingly. Your grandparents understood this. They bought houses, accumulated shares, built ownership stakes in productive assets. Somewhere along the way, we forgot. We got distracted by consumption, by lifestyle inflation, by the illusion that working harder would somehow make us wealthy. Hard work is important, but hard work alone has never made anyone rich. Ownership makes people rich, and the sooner you start converting your labor into ownership, the sooner you'll understand why some people seem to build wealth effortlessly while others struggle forever. The strategy is sitting there waiting for you. The question is whether you'll use it or spend another decade wondering why your parents had it so much easier.